Ciao a tutti. So, a couple days ago, I went and took the Italian Cils 2 exam. So I just kind of wanted to make a video to talk a little bit about my experience, because when I was preparing for the exam, I couldn't really find any general resources or just people who had taken the exam and their experience with it. So I thought I'd just make a video talking about my experience. Maybe that would help some people who are preparing for the exam, or if you're just curious about it, maybe this video will help you out. Maybe not. Hopefully it will. Anyways, so I went and took it in New York because I live in Wisconsin and there is not a test center in Wisconsin for the exam. According to the internet, there are 8 in the US because Americans don't really take these types of exams that often. So I had to go to New York, and they hold the exam twice a year. So usually one in December, November, and then one in May, June-ish, depending on the year. And so I had mine May 30th, and I went to take the exam. So it was at some test center, the Italian consult there in New York, and there were a handful of other people there as well to take the exam. So there were a few others taking B2, B1, and then I think A2 as well. So now we each were put in a separate room to take the exam. And so I took the C2 exam, which lasted 5.5 hours, which I know sounds super long, but honestly, I did not feel like I had sat there for 5.5 hours taking the exam. It did seem long, but not that long. So I suppose when you're taking a test, you're not really counting the hours by minute either. But honestly, yeah, I wouldn't say it felt that long. So it's different for each level. So it's just that being the highest, that's the longest because there's more to do, makes sense. So now there's 5 parts in this exam. There is listening, there is comprehension of literature, there is communication structure analysis, something that kind of just deals with grammar. Then there is speaking, writing, and yeah, I think that's all 5. So now I started with listening. So listening, I knew this one would be hard for me. And there's 3 little tests within this section. So now they're all radio interviews. So the first 2, I had a bit trouble focusing, and there was so there's someone in the room, most of the time watching you, obviously, so you're not cheating or whatnot. So he was shuffling papers and organizing stuff. So I'm not the best at focusing when I'm taking exams, and so I was kind of focusing on that happening rather than putting my 100% attention to the listening part. So now each section they play twice, so you have a little bit of a break in between, and then you'll hear it one more time. So that's a bit helpful. Then after that was the comprehension of literature. So you read, there's an article you read, you answer questions, and then there's 2 other sections that are relatively dealing with reading something and testing your comprehension on what you just read. So during this part is when the construction work outside began. So once I got to, I think it might have been the first section in this part, I halfway through I totally lost focus, and so then they came in and they're like, yeah, we're gonna move you to a different room. So after that happened, that was fine. So then each part of it is timed, obviously. So this part, each part is roughly an hour and a half. The listening's a little bit shorter, I think it's 45 minutes, and then the rest are each around an hour and a half, give or take. And so after about the 3rd one, after the I call it the grammar section, that one I had a 15-minute break, and then was the writing, and then there was the oral test. So right before I started the writing, there was someone else who came in the room to watch me, and she apologized for the construction work, and she's like, we didn't know that was happening. She's like, I went out and I yelled at them. I was like, oh, no worries, it didn't really affect that much of the test, honestly, and it was all fine in the end, so everything worked out. And So the writing, to be honest, like the prompts that I was given, like in general, I would just have had a hard time really coming up with like valid points to make in English. So now you're given 2 topics. You have 2 writing tests. So the first one is just kind of like, I would say an essay sort of question, but you don't actually write a full essay. So now for this part, you're required to write around 200 to 250 words. So you're given a question and then you answer it, and then you have to show like, you know, your knowledge of the language, and you have to, for this part, you have to kind of show like your advanced level vocabulary, like that kind of stuff. And so I think I did all right. I probably could have done better showing my knowledge of the language, but they were just kind of difficult questions. So then for the second writing assignment, it's more in a formal sense. So it's usually a formal letter. So in this case, I believe I was asked to write a formal letter to, I don't remember, I think it was like something to do with my city, and promoting ways that we can engage the involvement of tourists and citizens, and like the immigrants. So a way that like we can bring the city together. So I just had to like write to the head of like town council, giving them my ideas on how to make the city more like peaceful, more working together, I guess. And then for the oral exam, it's kind of along the same sort of things. You have 2 topics. So the first one is a face-to-face, like, it's not an interview, face-to-face conversation with the examiner. So this, like, luckily for the oral exam, I've been preparing for the exam for like quite some time. So all of the topics I saw there were topics that I had seen in previous test examples that I had practiced with my tutors. So I felt pretty prepared, and I felt like I did pretty well in this part. So the first one is a face-to-face conversation. So what that means is that you're given a topic, you're given some time to think about it. You can't write down anything, you can't really jot down notes. You have to keep track of it like in your head. So like I'm kind of asked like my opinion about something, I give it, and then the examiner can ask me questions or like agree, disagree, and ask me like to talk about more of something if I want to, whatever it might be. Don't blanking on what the first question was, but for the second one, it's just like a 3 to 4 minute of you talking. So you're given like another topic to choose from. There's usually 4, and then you have to talk about it 3 to 4 minutes, and the examiner just listens. Like she records what you say, and then she, it's sent to the University of Siena. And so for this one, I had to give my opinion about like how today more young people, instead of like going out and like, I don't know, buying a house or getting a lease or mortgage or whatever, they're living together, saving money. And I had to give my point of, I think this is a good thing, like what's going on in my country, if this, like the negative and positive like points of view from it. So I just kind of talked about, what like it's common for college students, and it's a good idea saving money. Sometimes it's not always the best responsibility wise, but overall, you just kind of have to make sure you're talking the whole time. There aren't like really any pauses. You have to show, your knowledge of the language, the vocab, like, using an expansive amount of vocab. And I don't know if I did too well in this section because I was more focused on speaking the whole time, not having any like dead pauses or anything like that. But for the most part, if you're prepared for the oral exam, there really shouldn't be any trouble. So that was kind of how the exam went down. If you're preparing for the exam and if you have any questions, of course, feel free to ask me. I'd be more than happy to help. If you want me to make more videos talking about the exam, like how I prepared for it or whatnot, just let me know. I'd be happy to do that. And thanks for watching. And until next time, I will catch you all on the flip side. Ciao.